The first time I realized my neighbor wasn't just entitled, but downright reckless, it was well past midnight. The kind of night when the whole neighborhood falls into that deep silence, broken only by the crickets and the occasional hum of a streetlight. I had just sat down in the kitchen with a cup of leftover coffee from the pot, lukewarm, bitter, when a sound ripped through the stillness. The roar of an engine. It wasn't just a car driving by. It was revving, straining like someone trying to prove a point. My heart jumped. I set the mug down, its ceramic clinked too loud against the counter, and I grabbed my phone to pull up the security feed. What I saw froze me. Headlights glaring, engine snarling, Karen's SUV was lined up at the bottom of my driveway like a bull ready to charge. She wasn't just my neighbor anymore. She was the self-appointed queen of our HOA, and she looked like she was about to treat my reinforced steel gate as if it were a flimsy cardboard box. Before I could process, the engine screamed and the SUV lunged forward. The impact rattled the night, a deafening crash of metal on metal that shook the ground beneath my feet. Sparks flew. The gate shuddered, but it didn't break. My gate held firm. Her SUV, though, bounced back, smoke hissing from under the hood, alarm shrieking in protest. And there she was in the floodlights that kicked on automatically, standing in her heels and shrieking that I had ruined her car. That was the moment I knew this wasn't about HOA letters or petty complaints anymore. This was war. And if Karen wanted to keep rushing my gate, I was going to make sure she regretted it in ways she couldn't even imagine. To anyone else, the gate might have seemed like just a gate. Sturdy steel bars set deep into concrete posts, a heavy lock, nothing extravagant. But to me, to my father, it meant safety. He was almost 80, his legs too weak to stand without a walker. My biggest fear was someone breaking in, leaving me scrambling in the middle of the night, trying to drag him to safety. I'd worked months of overtime shifts at the hospital to pay for that gate. Pulled every permit, filed every form, did everything by the book. That gate wasn't just a structure, it was my shield. But Karen, she didn't see it that way. To her, it was an eyesore, a violation of her aesthetic integrity. That's what she called it, I'd later find out. To me, it was survival. To her, it was an excuse for control. The trouble hadn't really started until she became president of the HOA 3 weeks earlier. Before then, she was just another neighbor with a sharp tongue, always muttering about someone's lawn being too long or trash cans being visible from the street. But the moment she got that title, it was like handing a toddler a flamethrower. She went from annoying to dangerous overnight. We started getting letters about community uniformity. She said the grass on my lawn was an inch too high. The caregiver who parked in my driveway was a safety hazard. All laughable until the morning I came home from a late ER shift and saw it. A bright red notice taped to my gate. Bold black letters that made my stomach sink, unauthorized structure. Immediate removal required. I stood there in my scrubs, the smell of antiseptic still clinging to me, staring at the paper like it had to be some kind of joke. My father shuffled out onto the porch, squinting against the morning light. His voice cracked with age. "What's that, son?" I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Just HOA nonsense, Dad. Go back inside. I'll handle it." But inside, my gut twisted. That afternoon, I walked to Karen's house, the notice crumpled in my fist. I told myself it had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe she didn't know the permits were filed. Maybe she just hadn't checked. She opened the door before I could knock twice. Arms crossed, chin high, eyes sharp like she was already holding court. I showed her the notice, told her it had to be a mistake. She cut me off with a scoff. "This isn't about permits," she said. "It's about aesthetic integrity. Every house here has open yards, short hedges, welcoming vibes. Then there's your prison gate." I clenched my jaw. I told her about my father, how I needed time to get him out if something happened, how the gate wasn't about aesthetics, it was about safety. Her smirk widened and she said words I'll never forget. "Then maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you." Something inside me snapped. I told her the gate was staying, that she didn't have the authority to order me to remove it. Her smile dropped into a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "We'll see about that," she hissed, and then she slammed the door in my face. That should have been the end of it. Just another petty HOA dispute, one more item in the long list of suburban nonsense. But as I stood there, staring at her door, I knew she wasn't done. Karen didn't bluff. She thrived on control, and she wasn't going to rest until she tore me down. And 2 nights later, when I woke up to my phone buzzing with a driveway motion alert, I realized just how far she was willing to go. The buzz of my phone dragged me out of a shallow sleep. For a second, I thought it was just another late-night raccoon tripping the sensors. But when I swiped the screen and the driveway feed lit up, my blood turned to ice. Karen's SUV sat at the bottom of the drive, engine idling, headlights fixed on my gate like the glare of some mechanical predator. She wasn't parked. She was lined up. Hands gripping the wheel, body leaned forward with this wild, determined energy I could feel even through the grainy night vision. I whispered to myself, no way, she wouldn't. But she did. The roar of the engine shattered the quiet. Tires screeched, gravel spat into the air, and her SUV lunged forward like a bull charging a matador. The crunch that followed rattled my bones, metal screaming, my gate clanging like a gong under the blow. Sparks shot across the driveway. The gate quivered, shuddered, but didn't move. Her car did, though, crumpling at the front like a soda can crushed underfoot. I bolted out of bed, yanked on jeans and a hoodie, heart hammering as my father's voice trembled from his room. What was that? "Stay inside, Dad," I shouted, already sprinting for the door. By the time I hit the driveway, Karen was packing like a cornered animal. Her expensive heels sank into the gravel as she waved her phone in the air, shrieking. Her face was pale under the floodlights, hair flying loose, makeup smeared. "Are you out of your mind?" I shouted across the yard. She spun toward me, eyes blazing. "You broke my car." I stopped dead, staring at her in disbelief. "I broke your car. Karen, you just tried to ram my gate." Her finger jabbed the air like a dagger. "This is your fault. If you had taken that ugly thing down like I told you, none of this would have happened." I barked a bitter laugh. "Karen, you just committed a crime on camera. That's property damage, trespassing. Do you even hear yourself?" For a flicker of a moment, doubt crossed her face. But then she doubled down. She always doubled down. "I was enforcing HOA regulations," she snapped. I gestured to her smoking SUV. "Sure, tell that to a judge. Explain how you plowed into private property because you didn't like the aesthetics." Her fury boiled over. She stalked to the gate, yanking at the bars like a lunatic trying to rip them from the concrete. "This thing is a violation. You don't belong here." That's when I hit the floodlights. The entire yard lit up like a stadium. She staggered back, shielding her eyes. The red blink of the cameras above the gate made sure every second was captured. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over 911. "Karen," I said, my voice sharp as steel, "leave now, you're trespassing." She froze, glanced at the cameras, then at me. Panic flickered, but she tried to mask it with venom. "I'll sue you for damages." I smirked, "Good luck with that." And then, just to twist the knife, I dialed 911 right in front of her. Her eyes went wide. Wait, let's not involve the police. We can settle this like adults." "Oh, like adults," I said, raising an eyebrow. "You mean the way you just tried to demolish my gate with 2 tons of steel? Too late." Within minutes, the sirens wailed down the street, red and blue lights flashing across her wrecked SUV. The officers stepped out with unimpressed faces, the kind that had seen 100 ridiculous calls but still had to deal with them. Karen rushed forward, arms flailing like a drowning swimmer. "Thank God you're here. Arrest this man immediately." I almost laughed. Instead, I calmly held up my phone and showed them the footage. Her SUV revving, surging forward, slamming into my gate, then her pulling at the bars, screaming like a banshee. It was all there, time-stamped, undeniable. The older officer sighed, rubbed his temple, and looked at her. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for attempted property damage and trespassing." Her face drained of color. "No, you he's the criminal, he's..." The snap of the handcuffs cut her off. The clipboard she always carried, the one she used to wave at neighbors like a royal decree, fell to the ground with a hollow smack. As they led her to the squad car, she twisted, eyes burning into me. "You think this is over? You have no idea who you're messing with." I stood tall, phone still recording, my gate scratched but standing proud. "Oh, I think I do." The car door slammed, and just like that, Karen was gone. At least for now. But as I stood in the driveway, staring at the bent bumper of her SUV and the gouges in the steel bars, a cold thought crept in. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. No, she was just getting started. The neighborhood should have been quiet after Karen's midnight meltdown. For a brief moment, it almost felt like it was. The morning after her arrest, I sat on the porch with my father, coffee steaming in my hands, his newspaper rustling beside me. The street was calm, the wrecked SUV gone, only faint tire marks left as scars in the gravel. For the first time in weeks, I thought maybe we'd get some peace. But peace never lasts long when Karen's involved. Less than 24 hours later, the storm came back. I'd marched into the community center that afternoon, the red violation notice still folded in my pocket, ready to demand answers from the board. I expected raised eyebrows, maybe some awkward apologies. Instead, the sound of heels echoed against the tile floor before I even opened my mouth. And there she was, Karen. Not in cuffs, not broken, but polished, hair freshly blow-dried, navy blue suit, heels clicking like gunfire. She stood at the head of the table as though nothing had happened, sipping coffee from a porcelain mug. My jaw nearly hit the floor. How the hell are you even here? You were arrested. She gave a dismissive little wave. Misunderstanding, nothing the board couldn't sort out. The secretary, a tired woman who looked like she hadn't slept in years, cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, the board convened an emergency vote this morning. Karen has been reinstated as acting president. Reinstated, my voice cracked. She rammed her SUV into my gate. Karen's smirk spread like oil on water. Allegedly. I barked a bitter laugh. Allegedly, it's on camera, 4 different angles in fact. And yet, she purred, spreading her manicured hands. Here I am. She slid a thick stack of papers across the table, her eyes never leaving mine. Effective immediately, all homeowners with private gates must submit to an HOA inspection within 48 hours. Noncompliance will result in fines, if necessary, forced removal. I snatched the papers, flipping through the lines of jargon, my blood boiling with every word. You just made this up. There was no community vote. Karen leaned forward, lowering her voice to a hiss only I could hear. I don't need one, not when the board backs me. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just dangerous behind the wheel, she was dangerous behind a desk. She traded the SUV for something worse, bureaucracy. I stormed out before I did something stupid, fists clenched around the papers. By the time I reached home, anger had burned into determination. If she wanted war, she'd get it. That night I sat at the kitchen table with my binder, the one I'd been building for months. HOA bylaws, old violation notices, complaints, appeals. I tore through them for hours until I found it, hidden like buried treasure. Article 7, Section 14, any new regulation affecting homeowner structures must be approved by a majority community vote. Her inspection policy, completely illegal. But I wasn't about to tell her that, not yet. Instead, I went door to door. The Johnsons were first. Retired, polite, always trying to avoid conflict. When I explained that Karen had fined them last year for a single garden gnome, Mr. Johnson slammed his mug down so hard the handle snapped off. Where do I sign? Next were the roses. Karen once fined them for putting up Christmas lights 2 days early. They didn't hesitate. Pens hit paper before I'd even finished talking. Then the Wungs, forced to repaint their garage because Karen didn't like the shade of beige. The Patels, fined for leaving their trash can out an hour too long. By sundown, I had 30 signatures. By morning, over 50. Karen thought she had an army. What she didn't realize was that the neighborhood hated her more than dandelions in summer. But I didn't stop at signatures. I went digital. A Facebook group, HOA Reform, taking back our community. Within hours, posts rolled in. She fined me for grass being 2 inches too high. She tried to ban my kids from riding bikes on the sidewalk. She called animal control on my Labrador. By day 2, the group had over 100 members. Her empire was crumbling, and she didn't even know it yet. That afternoon, as I watered my roses, the sharp click of heels echoed down the sidewalk. I didn't even have to look up. Karen, clipboard in hand, lips pursed. eyes locked on me like a hawk. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she hissed. I shrugged, kept watering. "I don't think, Karen, I know." Her grip on the clipboard tightened. "You had no right to challenge me." I turned the hose off, finally meeting her glare. "Actually, I had every right. It's in the bylaws. You should read them sometime." Her nostrils flared. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I tilted my head. "Didn't you say that right before the cops cuffed you?" Her face twisted, fury shaking her whole body. "Enjoy your little victory, Carter, it won't last." And then she stormed off, heels clacking like gunshots down the street. But for the first time, I wasn't scared. I was grinning. Because for once, she looked scared. 3 days later, the knock came. It wasn't the quick tap of a neighbor dropping off cookies or the hesitant shuffle of a delivery guy. It was sharp, deliberate, the kind of knock that comes with paperwork. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door. A man stood there in a dark blue city uniform, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Carter." "That's me." "Building and Zoning Department. We received a complaint about unpermitted construction on your property. I'm here to inspect your gate." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. My gate, unpermitted? That was impossible. I'd pulled every form, every signature. The city had signed off before the first post went in the ground. But his face was steady, unmoved. "According to our records," he said, flipping through the clipboard, "the permit was revoked 2 days ago." Revoked, the word hit me like a punch to the chest. My mind spun. Revoked? How? Why? And then it clicked. 2 days ago was the same morning Karen strutted back into the HOA office in that navy blue suit, reinstated as president. The timing wasn't a coincidence. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice tight. "If you can't produce reinstated permits within 72 hours, he said flatly, "you'll need to remove the structure. Otherwise, fines will accumulate, up to $1,000 per day." $1,000 per day. I forced a nod, thanked him, and closed the door. My father shuffled in from the living room, leaning on his walker, eyes full of worry. "What's wrong, son?" "Nothing I can't handle," I lied, but my jaw ached from clenching it. That night I tore through my files, my binder spread across the kitchen table like war maps. And there it was, the original permit stamped, signed, and approved. Proof. Karen had pulled strings somewhere. She'd found a way to weaponize the city itself. I scanned everything, emailed zoning, printed 3 highlighted copies, and slid them into folders like a soldier packing ammo. I wasn't just defending my gate anymore. I was preparing for battle. But why stop there? If she wanted to play dirty, I'd dig deeper. The next morning, I drove to City Hall and combed through public property records. Zoning maps, easement lines, setback requirements. Hours of dry, dusty files until I struck gold. Karen's backyard fence. She extended it years ago, right up against a protected drainage easement. According to the code, fences had to be 10 feet back. Hers, barely 4. A glaring violation sitting there like a loaded weapon. I couldn't help but grin. She wanted to use the city against me. Fine, 2 could play that game. That afternoon, I sent an anonymous email to the zoning department. As a concerned resident, I believe 1427 Lakeview Lane is in violation of city setback regulations regarding drainage easements. Please investigate. Attached were screenshots, records, maps, everything neat and undeniable. It didn't take long. By morning, my phone buzzed with a call from Greg, the only board member who hadn't completely sold his soul to Karen. He sounded half panicked, half thrilled. "Dude," he said, "what did you do?" "What do you mean?" "Karen's losing her mind. City inspectors showed up at her house this morning, something about an illegal fence. She's out there screaming at them right now." I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. Well, isn't that interesting? By noon, I was watering my lawn when Karen came storming down the street. Face red, phone clutched like a weapon. She stopped just short of my driveway, practically vibrating with rage. "You did this," she screeched. I raised an eyebrow. "Did what?" Her finger stabbed toward her house. "The city is threatening me over my fence. You think this is funny?" I gave a mock gasp. "Wow, sounds serious." Her jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. "You think you've won, Carter, but your gate is still illegal. The city already ruled. You've got 72 hours. I crossed my arms. "Karen, isn't it funny how the rules you use against everyone else finally came for you?" She shook with fury. "This isn't over." Then she spun on her heel and stomped away, heels grinding against the pavement. That evening an email landed in my inbox. From zoning. They had reviewed my permit file. The revocation, invalid, a clerical error. My permits were reinstated immediately. I grinned like a madman at the screen. My gate was legal again. Karen's fence, meanwhile, was now officially in violation, with the same 72-hour deadline she had tried to saddle me with. 2 days later, I stood in my driveway with a cup of coffee, watching as contractors ripped down Karen's illegal fence plank by plank. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, glaring daggers at me. I raised my mug in a mock toast. "What a shame," I called. "I thought it really added to the neighborhood aesthetics." Her nostrils flared. She slammed her door shut. And for the first time in months, I felt victory in my bones. But deep down, I knew. Karen wasn't finished. A woman like her never bows out gracefully. You'd think that after wrecking her SUV, getting hauled off in handcuffs, and then losing her precious fence plank by plank in front of the whole neighborhood, Karen might finally take the hint. Any reasonable person would have crawled into a hole, licked their wounds, and maybe reevaluated their life choices. But Karen wasn't reasonable. If anything, losing ground just made her double down. For a few days, though, life almost felt normal. The Facebook group I'd started, HOA Reform, Taking Back Our Community, was buzzing with energy. Neighbors who had once kept quiet now shared stories of her petty fines and absurd demands. People laughed, commiserated, found solidarity in each other's misery. My father even cracked a smile one evening as he sipped his tea, reading posts aloud. "Finally," he said, chuckling softly, "the bully's getting a taste of her own medicine." I wanted to believe the nightmare was over, but bullies rarely walk away without throwing one last punch. It started small. One morning I stepped outside to find my trash bins knocked over, garbage strewn across the lawn. I cursed, cleaned it up, and tried not to dwell. Maybe raccoons, maybe the wind. But deep down, a suspicion gnawed at me. Then came the scratching. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd hear the faint scrape of metal against wood. I'd pull up the camera feed, nothing. But by morning, fresh gouges appeared on my fence posts. Deep ones, too sharp and deliberate to be anything but human. I knew Karen was escalating. The confirmation came in the mail. A plain envelope, no return address, dropped straight into my box. Inside was a single piece of paper, 3 words scrawled in black marker. "Get out now." I sat at the kitchen table, staring at it under the harsh glow of the overhead light. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from rage. This wasn't HOA harassment anymore. This was personal. I tightened security. More cameras, brighter floodlights, reinforced locks. I thought maybe that would scare her off. But if anything, it seemed to provoke her. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed again. Motion alert. I opened the feed and my stomach clenched. There she was, Karen. Not the polished queen of HOA meetings, not the smug dictator in her suits and heels. No. This time she wore a dark hoodie, pulled low over her face, crouched by my mailbox like some 2-bit vandal. In her hand, a spray can gleamed under the floodlight. She shook it once, then the nozzle hissed. Thick, dripping red letters bled across my fence. Neighborhood scum. I didn't even hesitate. I dialed 911, voice low and steady even as my pulse pounded. "She's here," I told the dispatcher. "She's vandalizing my property right now." While I waited, I stayed glued to the screen. Her hand moved in frantic strokes, the words scrawling bigger, bolder, angrier. And then sirens. They arrived faster than I expected, red and blue lights slicing through the night. Karen froze mid-stroke, eyes wide, spray can clutched in her hand. She bolted down the street, but she didn't make it far. A patrol car cut her off, officers leaping out. Within seconds, she was pinned to the asphalt, arms twisted behind her back, the spray can still dripping paint onto the pavement. I threw on a jacket and stepped outside, the night air sharp in my lungs. The officers glanced up at me. "This your property?" I nodded, and "I've got the footage." Karen's head whipped toward me, hair wild, eyes burning. "You set me up," she screeched. I almost laughed. "Set you up, Karen, you're literally holding the evidence." One officer glanced at the red scrawl across my fence, then back at her hands, coated in paint. His expression was flat, exhausted. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for vandalism, trespassing, and harassment." Karen thrashed, voice rising into a shriek that could shatter glass. "I was protecting this community. He doesn't belong here." I shook my head, almost pitying her. "That's rich, Karen, real rich." The officers cuffed her, recited her rights, and shoved her into the back of the cruiser. She screamed the whole time, insults, threats, wild accusations, but none of it mattered. Because this time the charges stuck. By morning, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Word traveled fast. Karen had been arrested again. Unlike last time, there wasn't a shred of sympathy left for her. The Facebook group exploded with celebration. Finally, justice. I hope she rots. About time. For once, it felt like the nightmare might really be over. The HOA board convened an emergency meeting and voted her out permanently. Greg, the quiet board member who had always backed me, was elected as the new president. He promised fairness, transparency, and to stop using the HOA as a weapon. Neighbors waved at me when I walked down the street. Some stopped by to thank me for standing up when they'd been too scared. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without my phone clutched in my hand. But peace never lasts long with Karen. 3 nights later, long after midnight, I was jolted awake by the metallic clatter of steel against steel, followed by a tortured, groaning creak. I grabbed my phone, pulled up the feed, and my blood ran cold. Karen again. And this time, she wasn't carrying spray paint. She had a crowbar. The moment I saw her on that camera feed, crouched by my gate with a crowbar, the air left my lungs. She didn't look like the polished tyrant who once strutted into HOA meetings with her clipboard and manicured smirk. She looked feral. Her hoodie was stained, her hair tangled, her face twisted in rage. And she wasn't just rattling the gate this time, she was prying. The crowbar screeched against steel, sparks flying in the floodlights. The gate shuddered under the blows. My stomach lurched. I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I whispered into the phone. "She's here again. She's breaking in. Send someone now." The dispatcher's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Stay inside, sir. Units are on the way." But I couldn't just sit there. Not while she ripped at the one thing that stood between my father and the chaos she brought with her. I shoved on my boots, grabbed my phone, and stepped out into the night. The floodlights blazed white across the driveway. Karen froze, crowbar in hand. Her eyes locked on me like a predator caught in the act. For a second there was silence, just the hiss of her ragged breathing. And then she screamed, "You ruined my life!" Her voice cracked, raw and venomous. "I had everything, and now I have nothing because of you." I stood my ground, camera pointed at her, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Karen, you did this to yourself." For one terrifying moment, she raised the crowbar like she might actually swing it at me. My muscles tensed. I thought about my father asleep inside, about how fast I could move if she rushed me. The world narrowed to her knuckles white around that bar, the flicker of madness in her eyes. Then, faint at first, the wail of sirens rose in the distance. Her eyes widened, desperation twisted into panic. She dropped the crowbar, the clang echoing across the driveway, and bolted. But she didn't get far. The squad cars screeched around the corner, red and blue lights slicing the night. Officers leapt out, tackling her mid-sprint. She hit the pavement hard, the fight gone out of her by the time the cuffs clicked around her wrists. This time there were no theatrics, no wild speeches about HOA regulations, no shrieking about protecting the community. She sagged in their grip, silent, broken, as they hauled her to her feet and shoved her into the cruiser. I stood there on the gravel, phone still recording, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. One of the officers approached, his notebook out. "You okay, sir?" I swallowed hard and nodded. "Got it all on camera." He glanced at the crowbar lying at my feet, then back at me. His voice was heavy with exhaustion. "She's not walking away from this one. With her history, the DA's going to push for felony charges." And they did. By sunrise, word had spread across the neighborhood. Karen was charged with felony property damage, violating her restraining order and trespassing again. And because she was already on probation, the judge denied her bail. She wasn't coming back this time. The neighborhood exhaled as one. Relief rippled through the Facebook group, neighbors posting memes, jokes, even organizing a small gathering they called the Gate Celebration. Greg, now officially president, wasted no time rolling back Karen's arbitrary rules. No more ridiculous fines. No more secret board votes. Every change required community approval. Transparency became the new standard. For the first time in years, people actually smiled at HOA meetings. Retired couples talked about starting a gardening club. Parents planned a block party. The HOA, the same HOA Karen had once wielded like a weapon, actually felt like a community. As for me, I kept my gate. Sturdy, legal, unyielding. It stood tall, a symbol of everything Karen had tried to crush and failed. A month later, word trickled down that she had sold her house from behind bars. Whether it was to pay her legal fees or because she knew she'd never set foot in the neighborhood again, I didn't care. She was gone. But gone doesn't always mean forgotten. For weeks after, I still flinched at the sound of engines revving late at night. My father would sometimes glance at the gate with worry etched in his eyes. "She won't come back, will she?" he asked one evening. "No, Dad," I told him, steadying my voice. "She's gone for good." And I wanted to believe that. God, I did. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to fade quietly. Even from behind bars, a shadow like hers has a way of stretching farther than you'd think. The morning after Karen's felony arrest, the neighborhood felt different, lighter. The sun rose the same, birds chirped, mail trucks rattled past, but something in the air had shifted. My father sat on the porch sipping tea, shaking his head with a weary smile. She finally dug herself into a hole too deep to climb out of. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But I'd spent too many nights working ER shifts to ignore my gut. Peace never holds when someone like Karen is involved. People like her don't just disappear. They drag chaos with them even as they fall. For a little while, though, it almost felt safe. Greg moved quickly as president, undoing Karen's web of rules. Neighbors celebrated small freedoms, lawn ornaments, Christmas lights, trash cans left where they pleased. Kids rode bikes without their parents, scanning the sidewalks for clipboard patrols. For the first time, our HOA looked like an actual community. But Karen still owned her house, and though she sat in a jail cell, her influence wasn't finished. One evening, I came home to a letter taped to my gate. My heart sank before I even tore it down. But it wasn't another HOA violation. This one was from a law office. Notice of intent to sue. Her attorney claimed I was responsible for the damage to her SUV. Emotional distress. Reputational harm. They demanded I remove my gate and pay restitution. I laughed out loud, the sound sharp in the empty driveway. "She's in jail," I muttered, "and she's still trying to sue me." Inside, I laid the letter on the table. My father squinted at it, his hands trembling slightly as he turned the pages. "This is insane. She's behind bars." "Yeah," I said, rubbing my temples, "but apparently her lawyer is." The next morning, I marched into the HOA office, letter in hand. Greg looked up from his desk, his brow furrowing as soon as he saw my face. "She's at it again," he muttered. I slapped the papers down. "What do we do?" He sighed, leaning back. "Legally, she doesn't have much of a case. Your permits are valid. The video evidence is ironclad, but people like Karen don't care about winning. They care about draining you. Time, money, energy, death by paperwork." He wasn't wrong. And if she could manipulate the HOA and even the city once, who was to say she couldn't twist the legal system too? That night, sleep wouldn't come. I sat at my desk, binder open, pages spread across the floor like a battle plan. And then it hit me. If she wanted to play in court, fine. I'd bury her under her own history. So I compiled testimonies from neighbors, copies of bogus fines, appeals that overturned her petty rulings, screenshots from the Facebook group, digital backups of every video, even HOA newsletters where she'd slipped in unauthorized rules. It wasn't self-defense anymore, it was offense. 3 days later, I mailed a thick packet to her attorney, the HOA board, and the city. Over 100 pages of proof that Karen wasn't just difficult, she was abusive, manipulative, and dangerous. I thought that might end it. But Karen had one last card to play. One evening, as I stirred dinner on the stove, my phone buzzed with a notification. New post in HOA reform. I opened it, expecting another neighbor sharing an old story. Instead, my jaw dropped. It was from Karen. Somehow, she'd convinced a family member to post on her behalf. The words dripped with self-pity and venom. I was targeted. I was defending community standards. Carter fabricated evidence. He has the HOA in his pocket. The comments exploded. Most mocked her, dismissed her as delusional, but not all. A small pocket of loyalists, the ones she'd groomed with favors and threats, echoed her narrative. She's right. Carter's the real problem. He's tearing our HOA apart. Absurd, but dangerous. Lies have a way of growing if you don't cut them down. I typed out a calm rebuttal attaching screenshots of permits, arrest records, video stills. Facts. But even as I hit post, I knew this wasn't enough. Karen wasn't fighting in court anymore. She was fighting for perception. So I made a video. I stood at my gate, phone steady in my hands, my father visible in the background sipping tea on the porch like the unbothered witness he was. I laid it all out. The SUV ramming into the steel, the spray paint dripping across my fence, the crowbar still sparking against the bars. Karen can call me the villain all she wants, I said, my voice steady. But the truth is simple. This gate protects my family. It was legal when I built it. It's legal now. And no amount of intimidation changes that. What she's done isn't about aesthetics. It's about control. And this community said no. I posted it, shared it. And within days, it went viral. Not just in our neighborhood, not just in the Facebook group, but across local social media. Thousands of views, dozens of shares. Karen's narrative collapsed overnight. But even then, she wasn't done. Through her lawyer, she filed another complaint, this time claiming my cameras violated her privacy. The irony nearly made me choke. She'd screamed at me in full view of the whole street, vandalized my fence under floodlights, and now my cameras were the problem. Thankfully, the judge wasn't amused. At her preliminary hearing, he dismissed the suit outright and warned her attorney that filing more frivolous claims could lead to sanctions. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I'd felt in months. But Karen wasn't in the courtroom. She wasn't even free to attend. She was still sitting in jail, waiting for trial. And yet that night when I came home, my driveway was littered with broken glass. My father's walker tipped over on the porch. The cameras showed nothing. Whoever did it knew how to avoid them. Karen might have been locked up, but her claws were still reaching. The broken glass on my driveway glittered under the floodlights like cruel stars. My father's walker lay tipped on its side, the rubber grip scuffed as if someone had kicked it. I picked it up slowly, my hands trembling, a chill crawling down my spine. Karen was in jail. She couldn't have done this herself, which meant someone else had, a friend, a neighbor still loyal, or maybe just someone she'd whispered to through collect calls and letters. I swept the glass, set the walker back by the porch, and checked the cameras again. Nothing. Whoever had done this knew the blind spots, my blind spots. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about anyone she could reach. The next day, I called a neighborhood meeting. Not in the HOA office, not under Karen's rules, but out in the open. in the cul-de-sac where kids rode their bikes and neighbors once avoided each other's eyes. Dozens came, more than I expected. Greg stood by my side, his calm voice cutting through the murmurs. This isn't just about a gate. This is about what kind of neighborhood we want to live in. I told them about the glass, the walker, the threats that hadn't stopped even with Karen behind bars. I didn't sugarcoat it. She might be gone physically, but her shadow's still here, and it'll stay here unless we stand together. Silence fell. For a moment I worried no one would speak. Then Mrs. Johnson, the quietest woman on the block, the one who'd once cried after Karen find her for a single garden gnome, stepped forward. "I'm tired of being scared in my own home," she said, voice steady. "We let her do this because we thought we had no choice, but we do, and it starts now." The crowd erupted, stories poured out. Fines, threats, humiliation, it was like a dam breaking, and with every word, Karen's power crumbled. We voted right there in the street, not just to reaffirm Greg's presidency, but to dissolve Karen's legacy entirely. Every bogus rule she'd pushed through without community approval, gone. Her fines, wiped. Her intimidation tactics, banned. For the first time, the HOA wasn't her weapon anymore. It was ours. But Karen wasn't done. 2 weeks later, her trial began. The charges were heavy: felony vandalism, trespassing, harassment, property damage. The courtroom buzzed with reporters, neighbors, even strangers who'd followed the viral videos online. I took the stand, my hands steady despite the weight of her glare. The prosecutor played the footage, her SUV ramming my gate, her spray-painting insults across my fence, her crowbar sparking against the steel. Every gasp from the jury was another nail in her coffin. When it was her turn, Karen leaned forward, eyes wild. "I was protecting community standards," she hissed. "He's the criminal, he divided us." But no one believed her anymore. Not after months of evidence, not after years of abuse. The verdict came swift, guilty on all counts. The judge's words echoed in that hushed room. "Ms. Peterson, you abused your authority, terrorized your neighbors, and placed this community in danger. You will serve 2 years in state prison, followed by probation." Her scream, raw, feral, desperate, rang in my ears long after the gavel struck. And just like that, Karen was gone. This time for good. The neighborhood healed slowly. The glass was swept, the gates repaired, the fences rebuilt, but something deeper changed. We weren't just neighbors anymore, we were survivors of the same storm. Block parties bloomed where silence once lived. Kids chalked the sidewalks. Gardens grew wild, bright with color Karen would have found in an instant. Even my father, quiet and weary, laughed again. He told me one evening as we watched the sunset, she tried to break us, and instead she built us stronger. The gate still stands, scratched, scarred, but unbroken. A reminder that dignity sometimes means holding your ground even when the world shakes around you. I think about Karen sometimes, not out of bitterness, but as a lesson. Power can corrupt, fear can silence, but a community united is stronger than any tyrant. And sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with fists or lawsuits. They're fought with resilience, with patience, with neighbors finally saying enough. The night after her sentencing, I walked down the driveway, hand brushing the cool steel of my gate. The air was quiet, the street calm. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't waiting for the sound of screeching tires or the creak of a crowbar. I was waiting for something else. Peace. And finally, it had arrived. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.